Coming up, I'll explore a strategy paper by Mark Helprin asking whether Israel is misplacing its priorities in the war against Hamas, if there are bigger threats that Israel needs to watch out for. Bill Waybourn, who's the sheriff of Tarrant County, Texas, joins me. We're going to talk about fentanyl, about cartels, about all the tragedies and crises at the border. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
There was a telling moment after the State of the Union in which Biden was talking to a couple of leading Democrats, and he was on a hot mic. I don't think he really knew it, but the issue of Israel came up, and Biden is on the mic saying, you can see him and hear him saying it. He goes, yeah, I got to sit down with Bibi and have a come to Jesus moment, which is, first of all, kind of an interesting thing to say when you're talking about a Jew. You're gonna give him a come to Jesus moment. So there was a certain tone deafness, a certain kind of inherent weirdness about that kind of an analogy. But it's very clear what Biden is saying. He's saying, I'm going to put pressure on Netanyahu and Israel to slow Israel down in its campaign in Gaza. Now, Netanyahu, by the way, fired back and said, I don't know what the president meant, but this isn't like my policy. He goes, this is a policy supported by the vast majority of Israelis across the spectrum. He says, this is not my private policy. It's a policy supported by Israelis to destroy the remaining terrorist battalions of Hamas. And the last thing we want to do is, after eliminating Hamas, is bring the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, which educates its children in terrorism and finances terrorism. So, in a sense, Netanyahu was saying, I'm not going to give in to this kind of pressure from Biden if it comes to that. Now, all of this is going on while Israel is conducting a ground campaign in Gaza. And of course, the left is up in arms. They're always putting out little videos and images of leveled streets and broken buildings and rubble. And it's all supposed to be like, whoa, look at this. This is what the Israelis are doing. Well, it's a little bit of this is what happens when you attack Israel. This is what happens when you start a war. I mean, go look at Atlanta after Sherman went through it. Or go look at Frankfurt and Hamburg after the Allies bombed over there. But again, who started it? The Nazis started it. The Nazis started World War II. And so there's a certain kind of weirdness, a certain type of absurdity in watching these plaintive cries of horror when war produces what war always produces. Now, there's a very interesting article by the strategist and writer Mark Helprin. Mark Helprin, by the way, has served in the armed services in Israel and also is a very savvy military strategist. And he's talking about, in this article, which is called Israel at the Precipice Once Again, he is doing a kind of critique of Israel, but not a critique from the left, but a critique from the right. And what he says, in effect, is that Israel is trying to do something which may not be the main focus of what Israel ought to be doing. He says what Israel is trying to do is this kind of ground campaign in Gaza. Now, he says, yes, that is perhaps necessary to do. You want to eradicate the forces of Hamas. And the Israelis, of course, are coming across these tunnels in Gaza, hundreds of them. But the problem is, and according to Mark Helprin, this is why Hamas launched its attacks in the way that they did, and also took hostages in the way that it did, is Hamas knew that as long as they have hostages, Israel cannot blow up the tunnels. because the tunnels are actually very easy. Here's what you do. You block them. You put explosives in them. Kaboom! End of tunnel. End of all the Palestinian radicals and terrorists in the tunnels. But you don't want to blow up the Israelis. So this is the value, the political value of taking hostages. The second point that Mark Helprin makes about Gaza is he says that Gaza does not pose an existential threat to Israel. Now, this is actually important to realize why this is so. Gaza is on the southern border of Israel, the Gaza Strip. It's actually taken originally from Egypt. But what Helprin says is that what you have here is gross Israeli negligence. That's the only reason why Hamas was able to launch this attack. The Gazan border is only 32 miles long. So here's Helprin's point. He goes, listen, if you have sensors and fences, all you need to do is put an infantry squad of 5 guys with a heavily armed IFV, which is an infantry fighting vehicle. And he goes, you just put those, you space them out. And he goes, if you put them at a reasonable distance apart, this is his calculation, such a deployment would require the continuous presence of 320 troops in each of 3 8-hour shifts, or 960 total, allowing for leave, illness, and platoon reserves. It's about 2,000 soldiers. So what he's saying is that 2,000 soldiers, one brigade, which is less than 1% of the Israeli army, can fully protect the Gaza Strip. Now, why weren't they doing it? Good question. Well, the answer is, I've previously offered the part of the answer, which is political divisions within Israel. The left is fighting the right. They're arguing about the Supreme Court. The left is trying to do what the left in this country is trying to do to Trump. So all of this is going on. But the second factor, says Mark Helprin, is the Israelis were relying on technology. They basically figured, we don't need to have people on the ground defending these kibbutzes that are right across the border from Gaza. We just need to have basically surveillance, and that will keep everything in place. And Helprin goes, no, this creates a vulnerability. Technology cannot solve all your problems. You need technology, but it's only got to be part of the picture. And then Helprin goes on to argue that the real threat to Israel does not come from the south. It comes from the north. Why? Because at the north, you've got a force far stronger than Hamas. Who is that? Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is of a completely different caliber than Hamas. Hezbollah has 30 to 50,000 troops, soldier terrorists, if you will. They're pressed on Israel's northern border. Many of these people are battle-hardened. Why? They've been fighting in the Syrian war. So these are people who actually know how to fight. And they have an arsenal of 100,000 to 150,000 rockets that can reach Israel and hit the interior of Israel. Now, Israel has been really clear, which is to say that if Hezbollah launches these rockets, there will be a massive campaign against Hezbollah and possibly against Iran. But for its own part, Iran has said that if Israel attacks Hezbollah, Iran directly will fire rockets into Haifa and into Tel Aviv. So what Mark Helprin is suggesting is that this is actually where the greater threat, the greater vulnerability lies. That in effect, the Gaza business is almost a kind of diversion. And it's like, hey, Israel, you focus all your attention over here, but we, Iran, along with our ally Hezbollah, are actually plotting something far more dangerous at the northern border. Now, what is that far more dangerous? Well, the far more dangerous is a Hezbollah attack from the north on Israel with massive rockets, followed up by a direct Iranian strike on Israeli targets and Israeli cities. Now, according to Helprin, that is going to be a lot more to handle than this ground war in Gaza. And yet, Israel's current priority is to focus on Gaza, getting rid of Hamas. So I think I read this article not as a call to action of Israel, like stop what you're doing in Gaza and don't do that, but rather Helprin saying that, look, we got the situation in Gaza because you, Israel, were kind of careless. You didn't put the few people on the border that could have fully stopped this. In fact, some of the kibbutzes had their own people defending the kibbutzes, and in those cases, they were able to repel the terrorists pretty successfully. So Mark Helprin is saying don't think that this is your biggest threat. Deal with it as need be, but also prepare for the bigger game, for the larger kind of nefarious strategy of the Iranians, which is ultimately to press on Israel from the northern side using Hezbollah, which is, by the way, Hezbollah is really a creation of Iran. It is a Shia fighting force. Its current job has been essentially to dominate the politics of Lebanon, and it does do that. But at the same time, its real job is to keep its eye on Israel and to prepare for what the Iranians see as an inevitable kind of final battle with Israel. So I think Helprin's point is you dropped the ball once, and it didn't really matter in terms of the existence of Israel. Don't drop it a second time, because this time Israel's, not just Israel's border, but Israel's very existence might well be at stake. Financial experts thought we were in the clear. They were anticipating around 6 rate cuts by the Fed this year, and then the inflation data came out higher than expected. Friends, this isn't going away. It can't. The U.S. is $34 trillion in the hole, and yet we keep printing money, which pushes the prices you pay every day even higher. So, what to do? You can either bury your head in the sand, or you can do something about it. Well, diversify a portion of your savings into gold with Birch Gold Group. Gold is your hedge against inflation, and Birch Gold makes it easy to own. They'll help you to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, and you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Gold is a part of our savings strategy. Debbie and I buy gold from Birch Gold. You can too. How to do it? Text Dinesh to 989898. Get your free information kit on gold. Then talk to a precious metals specialist on how to protect your savings from persistent inflation with gold. Text Dinesh to 989898. Don't waste time. Do it now. There's simply no better time than right now to call our friends at PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition to start your journey to a healthier you. As I hear from many of you about how PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition has changed your lives, I know that each of us has our own reason for starting. I started because I was feeling kind of sluggish, tired all the time. Debbie tried everything else and nothing would work, so we just needed some help. I've heard from countless listeners who did what we did and started the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition program. I heard from one listener who went for his yearly physical. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The medicine made him sick, so he decided, let me try PhD instead. He has completely reversed his diagnosis. Debbie talked to a lady who, just like her, couldn't get the menopause weight to go away, and Dr. Ashley and her team helped her lose the weight and keep it off. So there are honestly so many reasons to start, and I cannot think of even one good reason to put it off. So make 2024 your year. Call PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition today. Here's the number. Write it down. 864-644-1900 to get started. Or you can go online at myphdweightloss.com. Here's the number again, 864-644-1900. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome to the podcast a new guest. It's Sheriff Bill Waybourn. He's the sheriff of Tarrant County, Texas. In fact, he took office in early 2017. He created the Human Trafficking Division there and also the Intelligence Division. If you want to follow him on X, his handle is at Bill Waybourn, Waybourn. Sheriff Waybourn, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Let me start by asking you about President Biden's State of the Union, in which he, I guess, made an unplanned reference to this illegal who committed murder in the United States, killed this poor woman, Laken Riley. And Biden calls her Lincoln Riley. And then instead of apologizing to the family for completely getting her name wrong, which suggests a sort of, I don't even care who this woman is, he goes out and apologizes for using the term illegal. He says, I should have said undocumented. And then he makes to me the most shocking comment of all. He goes, these people built the country. And I'm thinking to myself, illegals built the country? Murderers built the country? What are you even talking about? But haven't we reached a really strange moment in which instead of apologizing to the family for this death in a completely preventable situation, you're actually apologizing for supposedly misusing the word illegal? What do you make of all this?
Well, isn't it awful that we've come to a time that right is wrong and wrong is right? And him making that reference to that woman that was killed, and then everybody jumping onto him for using the word illegal, but you didn't hear them say anything about the victim. They didn't say anything about, well, this is because we have open borders, or all the other victims that have been out there because of illegal aliens coming across the border. And these are terms that are used in the U.S. Code. These are terms that are used in law. Is that, when you break the law, do you want us to call you an outlaw? Do you want us to say what you did was illegal? And they're trying to change our vocabulary and not make it clear of what we're talking about. And I think it's absolutely nonsense and shouldn't be tolerated by any of us.
Bill, you are on the front lines here. You are dealing with these issues. Texas, of course, is a border state. It's taken the brunt of what's going on as a result of this porous and open border. Can you give us a sense of what the magnitude of the problem is, and also what you deal with in regard to this problem on a day-to-day basis?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. And yes, the border is porous. And what I always tell people is, in 2020, my narcotics team took $20.5 million worth of drugs off the street. In 2021, that came to $22 million of drugs. In 23, we hit $35 million worth of drugs in Tarrant County that we took off the street. And my point is, what happened? The borders were open, the drugs were raining in, and then we saw fentanyl go off the chart for folks dying. And we've had those deaths. We've had those deaths not only in our community, in our jail. It knows no place that it's hidden from. It's in the gated communities. It's in our inner cities. So I believe that has been absolutely weaponized against us, and it continues to be. And I will say this, that we interviewed cartel members that we arrested in Tarrant County, and we've asked them, you're killing your clients, what is that? And this is the quote, direct quote from a cartel member that was illegally in the country pushing dope, is this: whatever kills the gringo is okay with us. And we said, but you're killing Asians, African Americans, Hispanics, everybody is being killed by your drug. And they go, everybody north of the border is considered the gringo. So that's one threat. And of course, we've had the child labor issues in our county. We've had human trafficking in our county. We've had stash houses. We've had cartel homes that they were holding people until they paid the cartel off because they came across the border. So we've had every piece of it going on in our county.
Bill, let's stay on the cartels for a moment, because what you said to me is a little puzzling in this sense. I've often thought of the cartels as sort of like the Mexico's answer to the mafia, right? And the mafia was perfectly willing to kill people, but they killed people for a purpose. And what was the purpose? Profit. We want to control Canal Street. The Genovese family wants to undermine the Bonanno family, and so on. So there was ultimately, and this is a theme, of course, that's stressed again and again in The Godfather, it's business, right? It's all about the money. It's all about business. It's all about power. So when you say that you got these cartel guys and they think of the people north of the border as gringos and they want to kill them off, even though these people are their potential clients, does that mean that we need to have a different understanding of the cartels than merely looking at them as highly profitable criminal business operations?
Absolutely. They want to undermine the United States. They want to undermine specifically Texas. And they should be considered public enemy number one. And they are a clear threat. And I believe that they are doing terrorist-type things. I mean, there's 300 people a day, I believe, on record dying of fentanyl poisoning. We're losing a lot of people. And a lot of these people are not drug addicts. You know, we've had that where somebody wanted to stay up and study for an exam and thought it was Adderall pill, and all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, they're dead. So I believe that this is getting to the point where we need to look at them as a threat to national security on the level of a terrorist. And I know that the White House would disagree with me right now, but they're behind the invasion of Texas and the 7 to 8 million people that's come across the border in the last few years, and they continue to be that threat.
I mean, it does seem there has been information that's come out over the years about the connections between the cartels south of the border and some of the terrorist groups in the Middle East. I mean, there are tunnels that cartels dig to the United States. Hamas has tunnels that are in the southern part of Israel. You have people who are decapitated by ISIS out in the Middle East and Afghanistan and those parts of the world. And then you have people decapitated in the south of the border in Mexico, and then their heads are hung up on bridges. So in other words, there is I think, not accidental similarity between what we see in cartel behavior and terrorist behavior. So what you seem to be saying is that there is not only a sort of the cartels aren't merely trafficking people across, but they're operating very much as terrorist groups south of the border.
Absolutely. And by the way, they have also ordered people beheaded in the United States and in Texas. So those things have happened over here also. And but they are an army. They are forced to be dealt with. They control the south side of the border. And there's some parts of the north side of the border that they are at. And we can't forget that the Chinese are supporting them. And we know now that there are cartel princes and our prince, you know, mid-level children of these cartel leaders that are marrying Chinese women. You know, it's that old kingdoms that they're making sure that the loyalty stays there. So this is bigger than people just think that it's just another lobster coming across the border. These people have a plan, and it's awful.
Do you think that our intelligence agencies and our federal government is aware of what you are describing but don't care? Or do you think that they are in ignorance of the magnitude of the problem?
I think number one is I believe that they're aware. And because, I mean, I've gotten, briefings from various agencies that, anything I've said is not, it's open sources. I'm not giving away secrets of what I've just described. And I think that they are aware. I think that they are limited on what they can do about it. And that limitation probably comes from 1600 Pennsylvania, that they don't want. I mean, the sheriff's associations all across the country, every leader signed on to say, hey, Mr. President, we need to declare them terrorist organizations. We need to secure our border. And they said, please quit calling them terrorists. So I don't know what to think about that. I don't think that they recognize or they're not dealing with the magnitude of the situation.
We'll be right back with Sheriff Bill Waybourn. He's the sheriff of Tarrant County, Texas. You can follow him on X at Bill Waybourn, WAYBOURN. How are you feeling these days? I feel just great. And one of the reasons I feel so good is this. I take Balance of Nature, fruits and veggies in a capsule, so easy to take. They have an amazing story of how this product was developed by Dr. Douglas Howard. It's right there on their website, balanceofnature.com. Now, Balance of Nature receives over 1,000 success stories every single month. They have hundreds of thousands of customers who have purchased billions of capsules of their fruits and veggies over the past 20 years. Their products are gluten-free, they're non-GMO, they contain no added sugars or synthetics. So I think if you're looking for something to help you feel better naturally, you should definitely give Balance of Nature a try. In fact, order today. Whether you order online or call them direct, you need to use promo code AMERICA to get the special offer, 35% off plus $10 off any additional sets, plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. The number again, 800-246-8751. Or you can go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code AMERICA, you'll get 35% off, plus $10 off any additional sets, plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best sleep of your life. After he invented the world's best pillow, he created the famous Giza Dream Sheets. Debbie and I have these all over our home. We love them. They're the best sheets you will ever sleep on. And for a limited time, you get a queen size set for $59.98, king size just $69.98, the lowest prices in history. Mike and the MyPillow gang continue to be canceled by big box stores, attacked by the media. They really appreciate all of your great support during these times and want to thank you by giving you free shipping on your entire order today. So to get the specials, go to mypillow.com or you can call 800-876-0227. The number again, 800-876-0227. Use promo code Dinesh. You get the famous Giza Dream Sheets, queen size $59.98. King size $69.98. By the way, 60% off the original My Slipper, so take advantage. Call 800-876-0227 or go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh, for free shipping today. I'm back with Tarrant County, Texas Sheriff Bill Waybourn. We're talking about the border and the Biden administration. And what you said is that the Biden administration knows but doesn't want to act, doesn't want to describe the cartels as terrorists. So you have the supreme irony, Bill, that the United States is keeping a watchful eye far away on the border of Ukraine. It's keeping a watchful eye on the borders of Israel. And yet we have a serious threat on our own southern border, and we're meeting with the indifference of our own national government. Why is that? I mean, why does it make sense for the Biden people to view things this way when they clearly do care about borders, just not about ours?
That is it. Ironically, the other day I looked at candidate Biden. He was running for office and he was up there and, in the field, and I paraphrased, but basically he threw out the welcome mat, says, you're fleeing your country, come to us. And he invited this. And for him to do something else now, it is going against what he had said. He made a promise to tear down the wall. He made a promise to open the border up for people fleeing. And my goodness, he doesn't want to change what he said that he was going to do. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And of course, now we're stuck with it. So I think he's in that dilemma of reversing courses. And he hadn't quite got there yet.
So what you're saying is really that he campaigned that if Trump says up, I'll say down. If Trump says here, I'll say there. So he consciously undid everything that Trump did. And in fairness, he didn't conceal it. I mean, sometimes I think, we criticize our politicians because they promise to do one thing and they do something else. But in this case, Biden was kind of upfront about what he intended to do. He did it. And now it's up to the American people to decide, hey, do we like it or do we want to go a different way? We've been talking about the cartels and about fentanyl. Let's pivot and talk a little bit about the issue of human trafficking and sex trafficking, because that too appears to be, it's not a new problem, but on the other hand, it seems to have reached a whole new level with this kind of border policy. Is that true? And what has been your experience with that issue?
Well, we've had a lot of experience with it. We have one of the largest human trafficking task force in the nation now that has been incredibly successful. But is that what I know is the Sinaloa cartel has said that human trafficking is as profitable as narcotics, if not more. So they are pouring a lot of resources into that because it's just a moneymaker. And they're doing both smuggling and human trafficking. I think that they have people who are labor forces, but also sex trafficking. And so they're sex trafficking some of these young people and some of the older people. and of course it's also happening here. I don't want to misrepresent anything. There are a lot of Americans that are being trafficked right now, and there are kids that are coming out of broken homes, for foster care conditions and so forth and so on that we need to get a handle on. But right there beside of that, the Mexican cartel is making a lot of money on this. And unfortunately, if I may go here in reverse, the sad part is that we've got a huge demand for it here in the United States for sex trafficking. And I would love to publicly just state that I think that government is not the answer to stop that demand. I believe that answer is with our churches, that I would love to see our churches off the bench and in the game and having men's groups specifically in dealing with this incredible sex appetite that we have. So I think there's several variables that we've got to go at this. But the cartel is making a lot of money. They're using our weakness against us, and they're doing it very well.
I saw a striking video, this is a week or so ago, and this was involving Sheriff Mark Lamb. And he had approached an automobile, and there was clearly an American white woman, and she had these migrants or illegals in the car, and there were cardboard mats on the floor, so these guys were ducking down so that they wouldn't be detected. Now, when the car was stopped and this was discovered, she acted like, "Oh, I had no idea. These guys just wanted a ride, and I was giving them a ride." And the sheriff was like, "Yeah, but why are these guys hiding and ducking down? And you even have equipment down on the floor so that they can do that." The reason I bring this up is because it seemed quite clear to me that while the cartels might be pulling the strings at the other end, they seem to be employing some Americans in serving as the go-betweens or the delivery vehicles to get these people across the border.
You are spot on. And Mark Lamb, by the way, is one of our great American sheriffs and a good friend. But they are doing that, and they are employing people on this side of the border for both the drug issues and the smuggling issues, as you just described. And that is occurring across the southwestern border from Texas, probably in California, where people are being paid to transport these illegals. And there's counties down there in the south that are in pursuits all the time. And a lot of that action goes on, doing just exactly what you described.
Are you hopeful that this problem can be corrected? And I say this because it seems to me that even, let's say that Trump wins the election in November, he has talked about, building the wall, stopping this dead in its tracks, and even talked about deporting illegals. But it's probably not going to be that easy to do, is it? And I say this because even the Biden administration admits a lot of these people have been released into the country. They don't know where they are. They might have been given a paper and said, "You have a court date in 2026, show up over here." But do you think that the country has the political will to be able to not only stop the problem in its tracks, but undo the effects of what the Biden administration has done in the past few years?
I think that is a huge hill to climb to deport all the people that have gotten in. I think it's a huge hill. One of our officers stopped a woman the other night. She presented him with her court date, and it was like in 2032. So we're way out on court dates, but I think it's a huge hill to climb. I think it's going to be a very difficult one. We need more judges. We need more people involved in that, but it's going to be tremendously expensive for us to deport them. And if I was setting the priorities out, I'd say we've got to seal the border. We've got to stop the madness. We've got to get a clearer understanding with these other countries, including Mexico. And I think that if Mexico is not willing to deal with the cartel, then maybe we even upgrade that to consider military action against them to stop them. But so I'm in that camp. But I think that we've got to seal that border first and then start climbing that huge hill of deporting people.
I mean, the reason I think you're quite right about the steep slope that we're dealing with here is because it would be one thing if you had bad guys who sneaked across the border while the country is doing everything it can to stop them from doing it. Because then you can say, you've acted illegally, you kind of got by us, but we finally caught you, and it's time for you to go home. On the other hand, if you have invited them to come in, you have let them in, you've given them permission in effect to be here, you've given them a piece of paper, in some cases you've bought them an airplane ticket and said, listen, we're going to send you to Florida to hang out with your relatives or buddies over there, and now you round the guy up. He goes, well, listen, I came over, I was apprehended by border security, they told me I could stay, and so I'm staying with their consent. You have no right to kick me out right now at your discretion. So I can see right away that they have very perhaps cunningly created a problem that it's not going to be all that easy even for a subsequent administration to undo.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that you hit the nails on the head. And unless they come into law enforcement's presence for some other criminal offense, those people will be able to probably deport fairly easily. But these other people that are out there working in the midst that we don't know about, I think it's going to be very difficult.
Wow, quite a problem on our hands, and you have helped us to clarify the full magnitude of it. Sheriff Bill Waybourn, thank you very much for joining me. Guys, follow him on X at Bill Waybourn, Waybourn. I've been talking to Bill Waybourn, the Sheriff of Tarrant County, Texas.
Thank you, Dinesh. It's an honor to be here.
Many of us have been a little startled to see the speed and prevalence of the trans phenomenon, not just the notion of people who claim to identify with another sex. I'm a biological male, but identify as a woman, or the other way around, but rather the attempt to erase sexual distinctions altogether, and in particular to erase the idea of femininity, the idea of womanhood, the idea of being female. I think this is something that, if you follow the comments of J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, you have this sense of concealed astonishment. That's something that she's devoted her whole life to, which is establishing identity as a woman writer and as a woman, offering, if you will, a woman's perspective. Suddenly, the whole idea that you are a woman is thrown to the side by the notion that really anybody can, simply by, quote, identification, become a woman. Now, there is a very interesting article in American Affairs Journal, in fact, a journal I'm not familiar with. It's written by Ginevra Davis, and it is an article that provides some real insight into how we got to this crazy spot. In other words, who gave us this abolition of femininity? Who gave us this notion, this cultural notion of the trans phenomenon? Who told us that there is a fundamental difference between sex on the one hand, which is a biological fact, and gender on the other, and gender is fluid. So sexuality is one thing, but gender apparently is something that can be altered. Gender is subjective. Gender depends upon how you identify and so on. How did we get all this seemingly out of nowhere? Now, one of the things that Ginevra Davis does is she begins by noting that this whole abolition of femininity, the whole attack on the idea of the female, the whole denial that sex even matters, that gender is the whole game, and that gender is something subjective. She says all of this is coming from women. And right there you have a sort of a puzzle, right? You have a conundrum. Why would women want to abolish the idea of womanhood? Why would women be for, you can say, self-destruction? And the article is an attempt to provide an answer to that question, and it offers I think, a very provocative answer that I want to sort of trace out. So, Ginevra Davis begins by talking about being a woman And she goes on to say that as a woman, from a really young age, she says, I'm sort of a captive of my body. So she goes on to say things like that when she was growing up, she'd find that she'd have like bruises on her legs, she would get cramps, she would find all these feminine deficiencies. I need this and I need that. Of course, later pregnancy. And she goes, as a woman, you're always aware of the fact that you are in a woman's body. And she says that the female body is the kind of obstacle, or as she calls it, the unsolvable problem of feminism. So what we're getting at here is that feminism comes along, it tackles a problem. The problem is women's roles. Feminism offers a solution, but the solution doesn't really work. And so the theme of the article is that the trans phenomenon is a radicalization of the answer because the feminist answer doesn't really work. So let's see what we're talking about here. Ginevra Davis makes the point that women's bodies are 16% smaller than male bodies. She says if you take an average female, put her in a subway car with 100 males, the female will be weaker than 98 of the males. So in other words, she says that not only do you have women who have different bodies than men, but she goes on to say that this creates a completely different female psychology. And what is she getting at? Quote, females are smaller and weaker than males, which crimps our behavior in subtle ways. We view the world as a collage of potential threats, not as a space for exploration. We worry more about alienating our friends and angering males. We take fewer risks, social and professional, that might end with us unprotected. The female world is smaller. It is arguably less ambitious. Now, this is the key to where this article is going, because essentially what the author is saying is that feminism came along and said to women, you can be just like men. What a man can do, a woman can do. And to some degree, feminism has been hugely successful. All these fields that were previously closed to women are now open to them. If you go back a century or so, or not even quite that much, you'd find that women by and large went into two fields. They went into nursing, or the health field, or they became teachers. And that was kind of it. After World War II, women went into the Rosie the Riveter, all of that. And it was only after, in the post-war era and the post-war decades, that women began to go into law and medicine and so on. But says Ginevra Davis, although women are like all over the place, and in fact, she says women dominate all the fields that have produced the trans phenomenon. So the trans phenomenon is produced in the fields of anthropology, lots of women. Sociology, lots of women. Counseling and therapy, lots of women. Journalism and writing articles, lots of women. TV anchors, lots of women. The View, dominated by women. So she's saying that women have sort of congregated in areas that are promoting this trans phenomenon, and yet, this is the key point, although women are now overrepresented in education, they're overrepresented in colleges, the majority of newly hired faculty are women, Ginevra Davis goes, there is one kind of sticky problem, and that is that all the great advances in the world, and even in the West, are still, to now, being made by men. Who is it that, let's take, for example, the cutting edge field of technology. Who makes the major discoveries? It's pretty much all men. Who runs all the big tech platforms? It's pretty much all men. There are one or two exceptions, but those are in fact exceptions. Who is it that dominates Nobel Prizes? It's men. Who is it that dominates the fields of physics, astronomy, cosmology, cutting-edge fields? It's men. So, says Ginevra Davis, what's happening is that feminism is offering a promise that women can run the world just as men, except women aren't really running the world. And it doesn't even look like, according to Ginevra Davis, this is even going to be a possibility in the near future. Why not? Because of the constraints imposed by the female body. The female body. And therefore, and here's where we get kind of to the punchline of the whole article, and this is, I think, what makes the article really interesting, is that Ginevra Davis goes, and so some of the same radical feminists that have realized that they've run into a dead end, and the dead end is we can compete with men up to a point. They've realized that the reason we can't go any further is because we're smaller than men. We're weaker than men. And as a result of that, our psychology is different than men. We are less adventurous, less entrepreneurial, less risk-taking. And that is part of the function of the way women are. And therefore, there's only one way out of this. There's only one way out of this predicament that feminism itself has created. And what is that way? Abolish the idea of gender itself. In other words, declare that there are no such thing as women. Declare that there are no such thing as men. Declare that men and women are ultimately optional categories. Import biological men into the so-called female category, where their accomplishments now, in a sense, enhance the glory of women. So, for example, if women are slower than men in, let's say, the mile, they can't do it as fast as men, that's fine. Let's find a guy, a biological male, have him run in the women's category, and he's going to break the women's record. So suddenly it looks like, wow, women are doing just as well as men. And similarly, if there are women who are who can't lift as much as men in the military, that's okay. We'll bring in some biological men. They'll do the same thing that men can do, and then women can go, whoa, women are breaking new records in this category. And maybe this can be extended to the world of physics and cosmology, where ultimately you have companies like Google, you have companies that are on the cutting edge that are being run by women, but not really women, biological men who identify as women, but yet they're bringing the stronger male physiognomy, but also male psychology into these fields. And so ultimately, well, where we're going with this article is the article is saying that in the current race that feminism has set up, and the whole point is it's a rigged race because men are stronger. And men have a different psychology. Women are losing all the time in the race. And so the only way to equalize the race is basically to say there's no such thing as women. And therefore, we're now going to have, we're all in the same category. So I don't know if this is a fully satisfactory explanation, but it is at least an attempt at giving an explanation that traces the pathway from the rejection of the traditional roles of men and women to an intermediate stage of radical feminism in which women try to be like men, and then failing in that effort, declare that there are no men and there's no such thing as women either.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.